Just like with the House, both sides here are in agreement that the IGG information should be excluded from trial, but because it's for completely different reasons, they're still filing motions and arguing about it. So let's catch up. Hey guys, this is Julez with True Crime Reactions. Disclaimer. Everything stated in this video is my opinion and my opinion only. And just like everything else in these cases we discuss here on this channel, everything is alleged. Now, we've talked about the last few doc drops of tons of paperwork, that there's been a few papers slipped in there about the IGG and how both sides are basically agreeing that for their own reasons, it doesn't need to be admissible at trial. The state wants to claim that it's just because it was a tip that came in from the feds and it's not important. And then the defense is claiming y'all pulled some boo-boo and we're going to prove it. So there's all kinds of different reasons for this to be excluded and for it to be admitted. It just is one of the hugest, most ridiculous catch-22s I've pretty much ever seen in a criminal case. Now, we've already had a court order from Judge Hippler denying the defendant's motion to suppress the genetic information. That actually was signed on February 17th of 2025. Then we had the state's motion in limine regarding the IGG come out in some sort of response to the argument at hand. But this is where we also learned that there was a lot more information going on regarding DNA than we originally thought. Now, again, we've pretty much known that Bryan Kohberger was not the first person that they were even looking at, or that they were even looking at him at all before that phone call from the FBI on December the 19th. But this one right here from the state that actually came out on 2/24 of 25 literally states that there was a different main suspect prior to the IGG, as well as two other unknown male profiles. Now, at the end of this document is where we see that they are just in agreement with pretty much everything. The state therefore respectfully submits that this court should enter an order describing to the extent in which the parties can discuss the IGG at trial and excluding argument or evidence related to the DOJ policy, terms of service, foreign law, policy debates, blah, 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 blah. Basically, the state is wanting to silence the defense and make it to where they are not allowed to mention any of the illegal loopholes or any of the other things that Judge Hippler has already come out and literally admitted happened, but that just don't matter. Then we had a filing by Becca Barlow, who is a DNA IGG expert that has been retained by the Kohberger team since the very beginning, but now she's actually taking a spot when it comes to arguing at the trial itself. This order came out stating that Mr. Kohberger's motion to exclude the IGG should be granted, and that additionally, the court should sanction the state by excluding the IGG evidence in the form of testimony of David Middleman. This is based on their violations of the court's order regarding discovery sanctions and its bad faith behavior in concealing evidence that it knew was required to be discovered and that it had in its possession. Such a serious sanction is warranted in the face of the state's conduct and to remedy the prejudice to Mr. Kohberger. So again, the state pulled all kinds of crazy shit and they don't want any of that to come out at trial because it hurts their case. Well, it's hurting their case now, so of course they're going to try to fight it and avoid it. Then a few weeks later, the state came back and said, hey, we didn't do anything wrong. We didn't act in bad faith. The defense has failed to show the state violated its obligations under the Brady Act. This court should deny the defense's motion to the extent the defense requests sanctions against the state. Don't deny the fact that they also want the IGG excluded, but those sanctions, yeah, we don't need to do that. The parties do seem to agree, however, that the IGG information should not be presented at trial. This court should thus enter an order excluding the IGG information at trial other than as a generic tip for the purpose of helping the jury understand how the investigation progressed. Without the IGG phone call on December 19th from the FBI, they would never have gotten to Bryan Kohberger. They're going to have to prove that they could have. And we already know that they couldn't have because they looked up all the information that was necessary and they couldn't find any connections to him whatsoever. They had to have someone help them. the same ones that are actually leading the investigation, took the inventory from Pennsylvania, took the forensic download of Bryan Kohberger's phone. They're the ones who swabbed his freaking cheeks. They literally did everything. That shit was not a tip. That came from the lead agency. No one's going to change my mind. Now, we've gone over all of those either in video or on lives, so now we only need to catch up on the last 2 documents that's been posted. Now, today is April the 7th. I will probably post this the morning of the 8th, just to remind you guys that the motion hearing, if it does stream on Wednesday, April the 9th, is not going to be streaming from YouTube. As far as I'm understanding, there will no longer be streaming on the YouTube page. Everything is going to be streaming straight from the court website. I will go ahead and have a link for that down in the description box so that you guys can grab that and be ready for Wednesday. This is the defendant's reply to the state's opposition to motion in limine regarding excluding the IGG. We're just going to jump straight to the only paragraph really here because it's just this. The state agrees with the outcome of the motion and has agreed to not present any evidence of the IGG process. In its papers, the state says it can present evidence of a generic tip without revealing the source or substance of the tip. Mr. Kohberger welcomes this agreement and asks the state to identify the specific witness who will testify and the testimony that will be given. Since this testimony will be sanitized for presentation to the jury to avoid the IGG process, it must also not falsely suggest that there was any other evidence or tip that led the state to Mr. Kohberger. And we've pretty much already come to the conclusion it's probably going to be Payne, and he's probably going to get on the stand and just be like, yep, we got a phone call, looked into it, found our guy. That's pretty much what's going to end up happening here. He's probably going to be the one they make do it. But just like I stated, without that IGG, without the work being done by Othram that found those 4 brothers that were distant relatives, distant connections, without them sending that information over to the FBI, without ISP also doing their own genealogy tree, without any of that stuff being done, they would have never gone to Pennsylvania. And if they try to say that yes, they would have, they're freaking lying. Now we have the state's response to what we just read. The state will be meeting with its prosecution and investigation team to identify who will testify about the receipt of a tip on or about December 19th of 2022. That's literally the Fed call. You cannot go around that. And the subsequent actions taken by investigators and the state and advised court and counsel. That's so ignorant. Payne literally said they got the phone call on the 19th and it was just a name. The guy you're supposed to look at, or the guy that you should be looking at, is Bryan Christopher Kohberger. There was no other information until the next day. He literally testified that. He didn't know if it came from knife sheath DNA, if it came from some sort of car identification. He didn't know anything until the next day, until the 20th. So they were just told to blindly go and investigate Bryan C. Kohberger and not even told why until the very next day. How are you supposed to sanitize that down without it being a complete and utter lie? You can't. It is unclear what the defendant means in the last sentence of his reply, since this testimony will be sanitized for presentation to the jury to avoid the IGG process. It must also not falsely suggest that there was any other evidence or tip that led the state to Mr. Kohberger, because there wasn't. Y'all literally admitted that already. The DNA is all your ass has got. There is substantial evidence gathered both prior to the tip and subsequently, I really doubt that, leading to Mr. Kohberger being the person responsible for the November 13th, 2022 homicides and burglary. The state will certainly not falsely produce or refer to any other evidence, but will rely on all of this evidence at trial to establish the defendant's guilt. You cannot come in and try to say, oh, we got the car tip on November 29th twice from WSU, and oh, we got a car tip from the private driver on or around December 10th, and use that as something, considering the fact that Ann Taylor states, and I highly doubt she's lying, that there's correspondence to prove that nothing regarding Bryan Kohberger was even looked at regarding tips or anything else before that call on 12/19. Again, Ann Taylor has stood up in court and says that she has correspondence between investigators and the people over at WSU about the tip that came in from the query of the car search and then the police officer walking through the apartment complex at the Steptoe Apartments and seeing the vehicle. That wasn't even checked on until after they had Bryan's name. She can prove it. So I don't know what they're going to try to say here about what they were able to gather prior, because we've literally seen nothing. We've seen nothing prior to the crimes that prove this. They have his financial records, his crypto records, and okay, he bought a mask in January, months before he even moved. And there's really no guarantee that he even has a mask that truly matches whatever Dylan claims that she saw. Because as we've come to understand from everything that we've now read and been privy to, the type of mask was basically fed to her by one of the investigators. And she wasn't even asked to produce a picture or hand drawing of anything that she claims to have seen until 3 weeks later. Weeks and weeks after the whole thing about the type of mask was even said to her to implant some sort of idea. And never mind the fact that her eyewitness account went from a guy wearing all black and wearing boots to all of a sudden he's a firefighter with a vacuum. How are you going to try to say that anything prior to that led you to Bryan? If they really can, and it's factual, I'll eat my words. I've already said I will pick back up my torch and my pitchfork if they can prove that it was Bryan Kohberger. But they're failing, and the defense is asking them for more information for a reason, because it's not there. The story is not storying. So, considering that the court has already denied the defendant's motion once regarding the IGG, I already stated that it was going to be extremely eye-opening for who ended up winning this fight according to the court. Who is Judge Hippler going to announce as the winner? They both want the exact same thing. They both want the IGG excluded. The defense has already lost that fight once. And I mentioned this, if Hippler turns around and grants this based on the state now being the one asking for the IGG to be excluded, that's going to be all we need to know about old Hippler. But that's it for the updated IGG information. Don't forget to go down in the description box so that you can grab the link for where everything is supposed to be streaming from now on from the official website. Let me know how you guys are feeling about this down in the comments. If you like the way that I present this information and give my opinion, please don't forget to leave a like on the way out, subscribe to the channel if you are not subscribed already, and please don't forget to make sure that that notification bell is set to all so you don't miss any of my rants, reviews, reactions, updates, or deep dives. See y'all.